Welcome to the world behind midnight. Tonight's file carries a Romanian government classification stamp dated 6 weeks after the incident. The stamp reads, "Denied Monarch's military personnel present. VEILBORN's own records say otherwise." Shah found a dog tag in the snow on the Carpathian Ridge. The name on it was Theo Bale. The date of issue was 11 years before Bale joined VEILBORN. 3 months. That was how long it took for command to decide that the 3 surviving members of VEILBORN were ready to be deployed again. 3 months of debriefs, psychological evaluations, and classified reports that would never be read by anyone outside a very small circle. 3 months of careful, professional attempts to explain away what had happened on the Karelian Ridge using language that the official record could accommodate. None of it worked. Because the thing about what happened on the ridge was that it had not been ambiguous. It had not been a situation that could be attributed to stress, or darkness, or the particular way that fear reshapes memory. 3 experienced, credible operators had returned from a forest in Finland with identical accounts of something that should not exist. Command filed the reports, classified them, and 3 months later, sent the same team back into the field. Not because they were ready. Because they were the only operators currently active who had already seen the impossible and come back from it. 2 new members were added. Luca Dragomir, a Romanian tracker and intelligence liaison who had spent 15 years in the forests of Eastern Europe and knew the folklore of this continent the way most people know geography. He had been requested specifically. No one explained why. Kara Ionescu, heavy weapons specialist, precise, direct, and possessed of the particular kind of calm that comes from having made peace with the idea that the mission might require everything you have. The briefing for Operation Silver Divide was 11 minutes long. A series of disappearances in the Carpathian exclusion forest in Romania, livestock mutilations, missing hikers, a logging team that had walked into the forest and not returned, and satellite thermal data showing heat signatures that none of the analysts had been able to explain. Large, coordinated, moving. Nobody in the briefing room said the word that every operator in it was already thinking. They didn't need to. At 22:11 local time, the same hour as the Ridge deployment, a detail that nobody acknowledged but everyone registered, a helicopter dropped 5 operators into a frozen clearing at the edge of the Carpathian exclusion forest. The Carpathians are different from Karelia in the way that one ancient thing is different from another ancient thing, not in kind, but in character. The Finnish forest had felt like silence, a deep, structural absence of sound that pressed inward. This forest felt like something else. It felt like weight. The trees here were older than the nations that surrounded them. The valleys between the ridges held fog even on clear nights, pooled in the low places, like something that had settled and decided to stay. The villages at the forest's edge were the kind of villages that had been built with their backs to the trees, windows facing outward, as if the people who built them had wanted as little contact with what was behind them as possible. Dragomir moved differently here than he had in the briefing room. In the briefing room he had been professional, contained, the careful neutrality of an experienced field operative. In this forest he moved like a man returning to a place he had hoped never to return to, not with fear, but with the particular tension of someone who knows exactly what a place is capable of and has chosen to come back anyway. Vanek noticed. He said nothing. The signal Nars had been tracking since they crossed the tree line was already present. The same low-frequency biological pulse she had recorded on the ridge. Archived under unknown, pulled from the classified database, and loaded into her equipment before departure. It was here. Same frequency, same biological signature, same origin type, not mechanical, not electronic, not anything her instruments had a category for. Different location. 300 kilometers and 3 months removed from the first recording. She noted the timestamp and kept moving. Shah found the tracks 40 minutes into the forest. He had been expecting them, not hoping for them, expecting them, the way you expect rain when the pressure drops and the light changes. He crouched beside the first print and studied it for a long time before he spoke. There were 2 types. The first was familiar in the worst possible way. Large, hybrid, stride. The same pattern he had documented on the ridge. Quadrupedal movement, transitioning to upright bipedal movement. Weight suggesting a body mass far in excess of any natural predator in this region. The second was different. Narrower, longer stride. The toe impressions deeper and more spread, suggesting a different musculature, a different balance point. Where the first set was heavy and deliberate, this set was fast, the kind of fast that doesn't announce itself until it's already finished moving. Two sets of tracks, divergent anatomies, moving in different directions before converging at a point further ahead. Dragomir crouched beside Shah and studied the second set for a long time without speaking. When he finally stood up, he said something quiet and careful in Romanian. Shah looked at him. Dragomir translated, without being asked. "These mountains," he said, "have old stories." Vanek told him that stories didn't kill operators. Dragomir didn't answer. He looked at the tree line ahead of them with the expression of a man who knew, from considerable personal experience, that some stories were descriptions of real things that existed before anyone had thought to give them names. They kept moving. Nars noted that the biological signal had split. Two distinct sources now, on different bearings, moving parallel to their route, one on each side. She didn't mention this out loud. She filed it under the time stamp and kept walking. They reached the abandoned village at midnight. It sat in a shallow valley between two ridges, accessed by a track that had not been maintained for decades. The buildings were wooden, the construction style of a previous century. Half the roofs collapsed under the weight of winters that had come and gone without anyone to clear them. Snow covered the empty street in an unbroken layer, untouched, which meant no one had walked this street recently, which made what they found in the buildings harder to explain. The damage was fresh, not the gradual, incremental deterioration of structures left to the weather over decades. Fresh damaged doors ripped from their frames, with a force that had taken sections of the surrounding wall with them. Interior walls clawed apart, the wood gouged to a depth of several inches by something with considerable reach. And the claw marks were not all the same. Vanek noticed at first. He moved his light along the wall of the largest structure, what had once been some kind of communal building, a meeting house or a storage facility, and he saw that the marks came in two distinct patterns. One set, broad, deep, widely spaced, heavy impact. Something large and powerful that had struck with force. The second set, narrower, more numerous. The individual marks lighter, but faster. The signature of something that moved with speed rather than mass. Two different sets of marks, on the same wall. Applied at roughly the same time, judging by the fresh wood exposed in both. Shah found the trails in the snow of the central square, two of them, moving in opposite directions from a central point, where the snow had been compressed and churned into something that looked like the aftermath of an impact. Shah said one word, "Pack." Dragomir corrected him quietly. Not one. At 038, the forest came alive with sound. It started as a single howl from the northern ridge, long, deep, resonant. The kind of sound that does not travel through the air, so much as through the ground beneath your feet and the bones of your chest. Then silence. Then, from the southern ridge, an answer. Different in pitch, different in cadence, but carrying the same structural weight. A statement rather than a call. A declaration rather than a communication. Then another, and another. Until the valley was surrounded on both sides by sound, layer upon layer of it, each howl overlapping the last, building into something that was not a chorus, but a confrontation. Two sides of a conversation that had been going on for longer than the village in the valley had existed. The team held position in the ruins of the meeting house. Nars had both sources on her instruments now. The biological signal had intensified significantly, both sources reading at levels she had not measured before, the combined output registering on sensors that had been calibrated for signals in order of magnitude fainter. She looked at Vanek. He was already listening. Not to the howls themselves, but to the pattern within them. The structure, the response, and counter-response. The way each sequence from the north was answered by the south with something that was not an echo, but a rebuttal. He had spent 23 years in situations where communication determined outcomes. He understood, at a level below language, what he was hearing. These were not hunting calls. He said this out loud. Ionescu asked what they were. Then, Shah answered before Van Eyck could. Shah said, "Territorial signals." Van Eyck finished the thought. He said, "This isn't a hunt." He looked at the northern ridge, then the southern ridge, then back at his team, in the darkness of the ruined building. He said, "It's a war." The first creature appeared at the northern tree line at 104. Blackford, 8 feet tall, standing at the edge of the forest with the specific stillness of something that has arrived at a position and intends to hold it. Its eyes were amber, not the pale yellow of the Karelian clan, but a deeper, warmer color, like old fire seen through glass. Behind it, 3 more emerged. Then, from the southern ridge, 5 shapes appeared against the sky. Different build, leaner, faster. The fur, a deep silver gray that caught the moonlight differently than the black. Different posture, lower center of gravity, weight forward, the bearing of something that moves in quick bursts rather than sustained force. The 2 groups faced each other across the valley. Neither moved. Van Eyck had the team pressed back into the deepest shadow of the meeting house. He had given the order before the first creature appeared. No movement, no light, no radio traffic. They were observers. That was all. Whatever was about to happen in that valley was not their conflict, and not their business. The silence between the 2 groups lasted perhaps 90 seconds. 90 seconds that felt considerably longer. And then the black-furred creature at the front of the northern group moved. It was not a charge. It was a step forward, deliberate, weighted, the kind of movement that carries a message without requiring words. The silver-gray group answered with a sound, low, continuous, a vibration rather than a vocalization, and the front 2 shifted their positions. And then both groups moved at once, and the valley filled with something that was too large and too fast to follow with the eye, and the sound of it reached a register that Van Eyck felt in his sternum rather than heard with his ears. He pulled Nars behind a collapsed section of wall. He said, "Nobody fires unless they come for us," because he had already understood something. Neither group had looked at the humans once. The battle moved through the valley the way a storm moves, not in one place but across a landscape, impact following impact, the center of it shifting constantly. The creatures were faster than anything Van Eyck had prepared himself to encounter. He had told himself, in the 3 months between the ridge and this deployment, that he was ready, that he had processed what he had seen in Finland and integrated it into his operational understanding of the world. He had not. Watching a black-furred creature cover 30 feet of open ground in under 2 seconds, watching another brace itself against a pine tree and tear the trunk apart with a single lateral movement of its forearm. His operational understanding of the world needed significant revision. Ionescu's hand was on her weapon throughout. He understood. He felt the same pull, the deep, trained instinct that says when something dangerous is within range, you engage it. The instinct that 20 years of fieldwork had carved into the structure of his decision making. He kept the order in place, because the most important thing he had noticed, the thing that had cut through the noise and the movement and the sheer physical scale of what was happening in front of him, was this. Neither pack was moving toward them, not incidentally, not because they hadn't noticed. They had noticed. The black-furred creature that had made first contact had looked directly at the team's position when it emerged from the tree line, for long enough that there was no question about whether it had registered their presence. It had registered their presence, and it had turned away. Whatever this conflict was about, and it was clearly about something, clearly the culmination of something old and specific that the 2 groups had been moving toward for a long time. It was not about the 5 humans sheltering in the ruins of a building in the valley below. The Alpha arrived at 217. Van Eyck felt it before he saw it, a pressure change in the air, a shift in the quality of the sound from the valley, a cessation of movement across the entire conflict that happened in less than 2 seconds and was absolute. Everything stopped. The creature that landed in the center of the valley was not like the others, not in degree, in kind. Nearly 10 feet tall, forelimbs that extended to a span wider than Vanek was tall. Fur that was white, not the pure structural white of the Karelian clan, but white marked with old scars. Long dark lines running across the shoulders and chest that told a story of conflicts that had been survived, rather than avoided. It landed without appearing to jump. One moment it was not there, the next it was, with an impact that Vanek felt through the soles of his boots, despite being 50 meters away. Every creature in the valley was still. The Alpha turned slowly, surveying the field. It looked at the black-furred group, at the silver-gray group, at the valley itself, at the ruined buildings. Then it looked at VEILBORN. Vanek did not move. The Alpha held the look for a long time. Longer than the first creature on the ridge had looked at him. Longer than any animal had ever looked at him in 23 years of fieldwork. Then it did something unexpected. It looked away, not dismissively, not as if the humans were irrelevant, more like a person who has confirmed something they needed to confirm, and can now direct their attention to what actually requires it. Vanek slowly lowered his rifle. He was not sure why. Some decisions arrive not from the conscious mind, but from somewhere deeper and older, from whatever part of human cognition existed before language gave us the ability to explain our own reasoning. He lowered the rifle, and the Alpha turned back to the valley. The dog tag came back in a sealed evidence bag. Vanek held it for 47 seconds, before handing it to Nars without a word. Theo Bale, issued 11 years before Bale joined VEILBORN, worn, not new, not planted. The Carpathian clans had returned to their positions on either side of the divide. The pass remained closed. The Romanian classification stamp remained unexplained. One question Vanek kept returning to, alone, in the hours after extraction. If Bale had been there before, why hadn't he said so? Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight to uncover the next operation before it disappears. Because some secrets are best left behind midnight.